Well, good afternoon, everybody. Looks like we've got a great group of A&R extension agents from all over the state. So thanks for joining us. I know that we've had a little bit of relief from the drought the last couple of weeks, and that's sure been welcomed. But I think this is also, good stuff for us to know whether we're in a drought or not, or what those variable weather conditions can be. So as agriculture extension agents, we're reporting weekly with that USDA crop and weather report. And then when we have these unusual weather conditions, it's great to know there's some other ways that we can contribute to have better and more accurate information that goes into that drought monitor that USDA publishes on a weekly basis. And I think y'all have seen that. And the Tennessee Climate Office is heavily involved in helping to gather that data and put all of that together and really represent the local county areas of Tennessee as well as they possibly can. And one way to do that is to gather more data, and that can be done through that CMOR program, which is Condition Monitoring Observer Reports, and that's open to extension agents. It's open to people in the agriculture community, or really the general public. But they're going to tell you more about that, tell you a little bit about what the Tennessee Climate Office is all about. And I think they've got some really useful stuff for us to share today. So Andrew and Elijah, I'm going to turn it over to you all. If you guys can introduce yourselves for us and tell us a little bit about what you do and what you got for us today. Thank you for being with us.
Sure. Thank you for inviting us. I'm Andrew Joyner. This is Elijah Worley. We also have Will Tollefson on in a different room, so he's going to be able to post links for us or respond to questions if needed. So I'm the Tennessee state climatologist. Will's the assistant state climatologist. And so I'm going to do, him and I have this kind of overview PowerPoint that we'll go through with 10 minutes or less, and then hand it over to Elijah for his much longer section to really focus on CMOR, how to do that, and why it's important for us here at the Climate Office. Elijah's one of our newest grad students that started this fall, but he actually has a good bit of background in the field of kind of drought monitoring and impact studies. So he'll expand on that a bit. So really briefly here, for some of you on the call may not even know that Tennessee had a climate office. We didn't up until relatively recently. The Tennessee Climate Office started in 2016, but we weren't the official state climate office until 2021. So we were able to kind of fill that map in. Tennessee and Massachusetts were the two only states without an official state climate office. And so now it's just Massachusetts, which they should be getting theirs official sometime soon. But we were happy we weren't the last ones. For the climate office, big picture, where we fit in, of course, there's the federal services, NOAA, National Weather Service, those types of entities that provide forecast and historical data. Regional services, there are 6 regional climate centers. We're within the Southern Regional Climate Center group. That RCC is based in Texas at Texas A&M. And so they do more regional products. For the Southern office, they do a lot, of course, related to the Gulf Coast or related to hurricanes, to severe weather, those sorts of things. So each regional climate center has their own kind of thing that they provide. And then state services, that's really what we were missing out on in Tennessee. And we do a ton with the drought. And so we're going to talk a good bit about that. And that's something that was not happening in Tennessee before we established this office. And it's definitely an area where we see there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration with all of you on the call. You guys are there in your community and can provide a lot of information to us that we can then relay at the national level. So Elijah's going to talk more about that process. The TCO in particular, we have a lot of partnerships. I'm not going to go through all of these, but certainly we've done projects and partnerships with NOAA and various NOAA entities, with TEMA at the state level, with TDEC as well, and a couple of other entities. I like to share this graphic to show what we do at the State Climate Office and what we want to do. And I'll show you some examples, but we put out a monthly climate summary. A few of you are on that email, but you're welcome to request your name to be added to that. But we also post these to our website. So if you want the email, we can send that to you, but we post everything same day on the website. We look at monthly and annual departures. Is it warmer than normal, cooler than normal, wetter than normal, drier than normal, that sort of thing. We provide drought monitor input. We did do a climate data summit 2 years ago, really talking about what the state what we have and what the state needs. We've done a lot with hazard mitigation planning, extreme events. So if there's the Waverly flooding in 2021, it was our job as the state climate office to call a meeting together to certify that as a new state climate extreme record and work with NOAA on that. And some other research that we've been working on related to modeling and heat health research and vulnerability assessments. So a few examples here. This is what our monthly departures typically look like. So this was from February on the left, very warm month earlier this year. In February, definitely even warmer towards the east. And then, of course, we've been in drought pretty much all of the fall. And so I put our November monthly total precipitation map up here. Will creates these and does a really great job. And so you can definitely see we were very dry across the whole state in November, with especially a lot of dryness in East Tennessee and Northwest Tennessee. So we post these on our website. So if you go to just Google TN Climate Office or go to our website there, etsu.edu/TN-climate. The monthly reports are here, and then we also post our weekly drought summaries, which I'll show you a bit of that. So we've been doing weekly drought monitoring since 2018, I believe, when we worked with the Southern Regional Climate Center initially and provided feedback to them, and then they reported to the drought monitor. More recently, over the past 2 to 2.5 years, we've been reporting directly to the drought monitor. And that's really where we seek feedback from others across the state. This is a example of a weekly infographic. Elijah actually has the more recent one that he'll show later. We provide these as well each week, so that's something if you want to get on our email list, we can add you to that. But we also post these to our website. In 2022, we became part of the Southeast Drought Early Warning System. Tennessee did. Before that, Tennessee was not part of any DEWS region. So there's several DEWS regions across the country. These are important, especially during drought events, so we can coordinate with not only people across the state, but people in surrounding states. And so as we saw with the most recent drought, parts of Alabama and Georgia were also seeing extreme or exceptional drought levels. And so that's something that we're able to know who to work with across state lines and work with NOAA on that as well. We did write most of the risk assessments for the state hazard mitigation plan that was just approved by FEMA about a month ago. I'm going to show you really just a few of the things related to drought here. So we looked at historic precipitation trends. These are from the 90s to present. So an increasing trend there of precip. Of course, with some years in there like 2007 that were very dry. I believe 2007 was driest or second driest on record for much of Tennessee. But then 2018, 2019, and 2020, 3 of the wettest years on record. So pretty interesting to look at. Standardized precipitation index from 1895 till 2022 shows pretty much increasing precipitation across all of Tennessee, with some areas, especially south, middle, and southeast Tennessee, seeing the strongest signals there. And then we've also done trend analysis related to these different drought levels over the past 20 or so years. Parts of North Tennessee and Northeast Tennessee have been seeing a bit less drought, or been part of the different drought categories a bit less over that time period. The other thing that we're working on going into the future that we see as really helping us with drought monitoring and improving what we can do and provide is to build a statewide mesonet. What that involves is a research grade weather station that looks like this. This is an example in Kentucky, Southeast Kentucky. We went to one of their stations a few years ago to see how they build them, how they maintain them, and just to kind of get our hands and eyes on the sensors there. There's a lot of great tools and information that can come from these stations, and the idea would be that we would have at least one in every county. This would also include soil moisture. So here's a good profile here of all the different sensors that would be included in that. Definitely on the drought and ag side, the soil moisture and soil temperature probes that would go 5 different depths into the ground. So these equate to as 5, 10, 20, 50, and 100 centimeters. So about 2 inches, 4 inches, 8 inches, 20 inches, and 50 inches, or 40 inches is about what those probes would be at. And that's pretty standard across most of the other states that have mesonets. So we would have that data. We would have temperature and precipitation at 2 different levels. It's a 10-meter tower. So with temperature and wind speed and wind direction, we could actually look at inversion monitoring. So we could provide a really easy app or information to farmers on when they should spray pesticides. If there's a temperature inversion, they spray, it could drift to another field where they don't want it, or to a neighbor's property, a completely different crop. And so that's something that a lot of other states have done with their mesonet as well, that we would think would be really important for the ag community. So we're working on a project there to get one in every county across the state. We'll find out in January if the Governor Lee will include that in his budget for this next year. So we'll be on the lookout for that. Most states have a mesonet. Tennessee is one of a handful that do not. Between the states that have one and have funding for one, there's 38 states, and that leaves 12 states without a mesonet, including Tennessee. We've created suitability and feasibility maps and everything to go along with that over this past year. So we pretty much know where we should put stations now. There are a lot stronger requirements for the placement of these stations than your standard backyard stations. And Will, if you have the link for that, you can throw that story map into the chat so people can explore that if they want to. Part of that story map, when Will shares that link at the very end, there's a survey. You're welcome. If you have ideas for where we should put stations, you can fill out that survey and put a pin on a map, and we will vet that site and add it to our potential sites map. With the statewide mesonet, there's lots of other things that we can create and provide as far as data and climate services go for the state. They include possibly a weather forecast hazard index, a climate data portal, which we're going to work with TEMA on that to make our data more accessible so you can use it. Heat health vulnerability tool and other sector specific products like the temperature inversion modeling for spraying pesticides and those sorts of things we would be able to create from the data. So that's pretty much all I had. So I'm going to hand it over to Elijah now to dive more into what we do on the drought monitoring side and how you can provide reports through that tool. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers after that.
All right, so I'm gonna squeeze up in here. How's everybody doing? My name's Elijah Worley, and I've been working with the Tennessee State Climate Office, like Andrew said, for about a couple of months now since I started the grad program here. And so, yeah, I'm going to talk today a little bit about CMOR and why we're interested in working with you guys and bringing you all into helping us, pull some data on ground conditions to help with our monitoring effort. So it's just, yeah, okay, cool. So just a little bit about you, about myself, just so you guys know who's giving you a spiel today. So like I said, I'm Elijah Worley. I'm the Chief Drought Officer with the TCO. I've been working on a master's degree with ETSU and working closely with Andrew and Will at the TCO on drought reporting. And so before this, I worked with the USDA Forest Service at the Southeast Climate Hub and got a bit of a background in response and management for agriculture following natural disturbances. That's where I started off. We did some stuff with hurricane prep for all of the major commodities in the Southeast. We put together a guide on how producers deal with saltwater intrusion and how to manage that at the different levels of saltwater intrusion along the coasts. And then recently, in my last little stint with the Forest Service, I began working with Meredith Muth at the NOAA NIDIS Southeast Dews, like what Andrew was talking about, the drought early warning system. Looking at how different states in the Southeast report drought impacts to agriculture. So that's a report that we're working on right now. It covers all the states in the Southeast and how they report all the way down to a county level, and what kind of emphasis they put on collecting drought impact information to agriculture, whether they do, whether they don't, how they do it. Barriers to getting that information in, using that information, and then how they, go about their drought response. So just quick for anyone who doesn't know or is familiar with it. So the U.S. Drought Monitor it began in 2000, and it was formed by the National Drought Mitigation Center, NDMC, NOAA, and the USDA. And so they draw maps. I'm sure you guys have seen some maps like this floating around. They release a drought map every Tuesday for the United States. And so a group of meteorologists and climatologists get together and author those maps. And it classifies the United States through different levels of drought, from normal conditions to abnormally dry, all the way up to exceptional drought, which is the highest level of D4. And so they use a convergence of evidence approach. They bring together satellite imagery data, physical data like precipitation indexes, stream flow, soil moisture, but then they also pair that with on-the-ground observation reports of drought conditions and impacts to agriculture, forestry, and the different sectors across the United States. And so I'm going to break the presentation really quickly. I just break it like that.
We just do that.
Okay. Yeah.
There you go.
And then
Go there.
I'm going to take you guys through, first thing I'll show you is drought.gov. I don't know how familiar you guys are with this website, but it's a really great resource for, getting information about the drought conditions by sector, by location. So I'll take you through that. The first thing you see is the U.S. Drought Monitor, the current iteration of it. And then it shows you, what's the percentage in, say, severe drought, 9.6 right now. But then it also allows you to look at a seasonal drought outlook, which is really useful. See the drought removal likely in Northeast Tennessee, but drought remaining, but improving across the majority of Tennessee, with a little bit of drought persisting near the Tennessee-Kentucky border. So it's a really great information resource. I was going to show you guys, you can come up here and click by sector, go to agriculture and see some really cool statistics. You can see the areas of the United States in drought and the commodities that are grown there. So if we zoom in, we can see, corn. We've got a lot of corn in the area of D3, which is extreme drought. And let's see, we've also got soybeans, a lot of soybeans in this area of D2. Hay and cattle have been the biggest impacts that we've seen, and I'll get into that a little bit later, but the biggest impacts we've seen from this latest flash drought that we've been looking at, a lot of reports of supplemental feeding, pastures being, just decimated by the conditions, having to sell livestock, having to tote in water. So you can see a lot of that livestock in that D3 area, and this was actually previously D4 a couple of weeks ago. So we can see a lot of impacts in that area. You can scroll down and see, this is for the entire United States, but you can see a lot of useful statistics grabbed from the National Agriculture Statistics Service. 2.1 or 21.4 million beef cattle experiencing some level of drought. So that's really useful. And then you can also come up here and put in, let's see, Tennessee. Yeah. And you can go down to the state scale, see some really interesting statistics. The amount of people that are in drought, how dry, October was the big month for this this flash drought that we just experienced and are continuing to experience a bit, seeing that it's the 12th driest October on record. You can see the current drought monitor, but you can also see, a 1 week change. You can see, this big area that got a lot of rain in the last week. It also has short-term indexes, multi-indicator drought index, looking at non-irrigated agriculture, topsoil moisture, switching back to long-term, which is showing, like increase of wildfire intensity. So it's just a really useful metric. You can also see, what the NWS areas that they've issued drought information statements for, and a little bit of, history of drought in Tennessee. And then if you click over, you can come to the Southeast Dews, where you can learn a little bit more about drought planning and the like. So I'm going to hop back to, oh no, I'll take you through the U.S. Drought Monitor as well. So this is the U.S. Drought Monitor main page. So just like what we're seeing over here in the presentation, you can see, the areas of drought, and you can see the really bad drought down in Louisiana. They've been getting it really bad this entire time. But yeah, so it's got a lot of useful information on this page as well. You can go to a comparison slider to, put in, last week to this week. You can see how drought has developed. We're seeing some improvements across Tennessee. You can see that area of D3 going down. It's got some really cool data. I like the time series the most. Putting in state, if you want to look at a specific state. So Tennessee, you can see drought and how it's progressed over time, seeing that we had a really bad drought back in 2007, 2008. You can see this latest flash drought that we've been experiencing on this time series as well. Gives you a lot of cool conditions and outlooks. Looking at the current conditions, short term, but also, Palmer Drought Severity Index, if you're interested in that. It'll load, sorry. But yeah, so this whole web page has a lot of great information that, if I don't answer any questions today, we feel free to shoot it in the chat and we'll do our best. But, this is a really great resource, especially for agriculture and drought. You can see like livestock and forage. You can see the breakdown, percent area affected by drought across the United States. So this is where a lot of that, the stuff that you're submitting to USDA NASS comes into effect. And this is stuff that we look at. So let me jump back to the presentation if I can. Yeah, okay. So now getting into the CMOR tool, so the Condition Monitoring Observer Reports tool. So this is a drought impact reporter tool that serves as a really, really great vehicle for getting information on ground conditions to us at the TCO. And so this is like the main deposit of information that we use to look at the conditions that producers are experiencing. And it's been super helpful, during this past flash drought. I know I was on here like every day looking for more reports, looking, to see where the drought was experiencing, where it was ramping up the most. And because ag impacts, as you guys know, are typically felt first in a flash drought. And that's our indicator of, this is where it's going to get worse in the next week. And so that's super important because, sometimes that the satellite imagery data, the remote sensing data that we have can sometimes lag behind the actual impacts that we're seeing. But it's also, if we're on the fence about making a decision for an area, this helps us a lot because it gives us an indication of how fast areas are drying up before the physical data could show the actual conditions. So we use this a lot. And as you can see, this is where the flash drought started kicking in October. We're seeing more reports. This is, I believe, the year to date. So this is the entire year, but you can really see it ramp up, as the drought came on in September, October. So I'm going to take you through super simple process for submitting information for CMOR. You start by downloading Esri's Survey 123 field app and can click continue without signing in. Then you allow the app to use your geolocation, but you don't have to let it log your exact location. You can just snap it to the nearest city. That helps with privacy concerns, people not wanting, point right over their house, letting people know, that's where I live. So yeah, you can snap it to the nearest city. You download the survey from unl.edu/CMOR. If you have the link, you could throw that in the chat. And then you provide the date. You'd indicate the dryness on this scale from severely dry to severely wet. So that helps, us be able to classify, this area, this county is, we're thinking about putting it towards D0 or D1 or up into D2, D3, D4. Then you'd answer some questions, which is optional, but it's super helpful to us because that gives us more information to pull from. We can see, if they're toting water in, if the ponds are low, anything like that, that helps us interpret what you guys are seeing on the ground level. You can also upload photos, which is, again, optional but helpful. That I know I've on every report that I've given to the USDM, I include almost every single photo that I can, just to, really show this is what we're seeing on the ground. Having a photo really helps drive the message home. And so then you identify yourself as an extension agent, which helps us to know whether the report is coming from you or another department or a citizen observer. I know whenever I see an extension agent logging something on CMOR, like a report, I'm immediately, like, my eyes snap to it. I'm like, okay, there it is. I can completely get a good description of what's going on the ground. And then entering a display name, which from what I've seen with extension is usually just, the county followed by the word extension. And then you just submit the report. So I'm gonna break screen again and see if I can.
Up there.
Oh no. How do I get there? Okay. Technical difficulties, my apologies. Not
There
a
you go.
whiz kid when it comes to
There
technology,
you go.
believe it or not. Thanks.
Yeah, you should be able to go there.
Okay. So you would just come to CMOR. I'm just going to take you through how to fill out a report really quickly. Super simple, super streamlined process. So you just go to submit a report. And I think I'm actually going to go ahead and submit a report for our area just while I'm here. So yeah, just allow it to use your location, but you can drag this, to a different point wherever you'd like to. It just helps us because we're doing this at a county level. Select your state, Tennessee. Well,
I'll say if you're putting in a location within your county, you don't want to put it right on someone's property, put it in the general area. It is perfectly fine, just so we get a sense for what's going on in that area.
we're in Washington County?
We're in Washington.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I'm from Sullivan
He's
County,
in Sullivan.
so I always forget. So yeah, use today's date, and I think I'd say that it's mildly dry or near normal here.
I'd say near.
Near normal, okay. How much experience? Personally, I have less than 5 years, but I'm gonna put 5 to 10 because of Andrew's here. How many times in the past have you seen it like this? Twice or more? Yeah, it's super simple. We can say as recently as 2022, widespread normal conditions in our area. You can go through, it's more normal conditions for this type of year. Really simple stuff. You go through crop production impact. This is where, the bread and butter, less water for irrigation, crop disease, plant stress. How are they, how are the crop conditions at this time? For here, I would say good. Yield prospects are normal. Planting status, harvest status, switching over to livestock. This is a lot of what we were seeing in the flash drought across the state: supplemental feed, reduced pasture or forage, feeding hay early. We didn't see a lot of mortality, but we did see a lot of sold livestock and less water in ponds and creeks. Range of the conditions, if you're interested in municipal water supply, household impacts, we saw a lot of that. We also saw a lot of forest impact with the buildup of 1-hour fuels, and that led to the wildfires that we saw across the state.
I'll add here too, all of these are sections that you don't have to fill out. You can go to the section that's most relevant to your expertise, which is mainly what Elijah already went over earlier. But if there's other areas that you want to put information in, then the more information helps us.
Yeah, and then the consistency of reporting is super important as well. If you're in, preferably we'd like year-round reporting, because it it helps develop a sort of a baseline archived. This is normal. We could compare. When October of last year, if we weren't in drought, we can compare October of this year, and we can see pictures of normal conditions versus the conditions we're seeing right now. And yeah, just like what Andrew said, seeing where your primary expertise are. We have a guy, I have no idea who he is. He goes by Bigfoot, but he reports a lot of forest impacts in his county, and so we see him consistently as well. And this is where you can upload photos. You can put in a description. This this is huge. The description section, all of these help, but this is where you can lay it all out and say, this is what I'm seeing. It's never been like this. This is really bad. We need, to upgrade, or I guess degrade this area in terms of drought severity. And then this is where you can put in, extension or farm service agency, and a display name. And then, you can put in your name. They won't use it for public facing maps. So that helps protect, citizen observers and you guys. And then you just click submit and you're good to go. So, next slide. There we go. So yeah, I'll talk about the successes that we've seen not only in the Southeast, but also in the northwestern states. Building this reporting network, especially using you guys, extension agents, to help bolster the ranks and get more information in. We saw that a lot in North and South Carolina, which is where I believe is where CoCoRaHS was first piloted, was in the Carolinas. And so they were able to get a large network of community reporters and extension agents using CoCoRaHS, CMOR, and they also, North Carolina tied in an extension agent, solely an extension agent survey that was the exact same as CMOR, but it just gave them another avenue for reporting that information directly to the head of the extension agency. So they both created really good reporters, and we see their impact on the CMOR maps consistently. And then as well as North Dakota and Montana, who both had workshops with Kelly Smith with NDNC that does a lot of outreach and education on CMOR and how to report. They had workshops with them, and that bolstered their ranks and got a lot of collaboration with extension agents that consistently report. So that was another success that we saw. And so again, the benefits, why does this all matter? If we get you guys to, work with us and kind of report a little bit, it helps our decision making. Like I said, if we're looking at an area and we're looking at the satellite remote sensing data, SPI blends and precipitation indices and stuff, and we're trying to decide what, should we move it from D2 to D3, or should we keep it at D2 and let's see, if we have a point there from an extension agent that is saying, is clearly indicating that the area needs to be in D3, that helps our decision making, and that gives us a lot more faith in drawing that line up to D3 for that county or for that area. And so consistent reporting, again, like I said, establishes that baseline of normal conditions that we can use to compare back to and say, we can see this picture of a pasture not in drought conditions versus now, okay, yeah, that's really bad. So let's consider moving that up to the next level of drought severity.
I'd say this gets really critical. Elijah mentioned D3. Once a county's in D3, then that opens some certain funds up for crop loss disaster assistance. And so making sure that we have that map drawn as accurately as possible is pretty critical for those types of decisions.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the big thing here. USDM wasn't designed and created to serve as like a trigger for drought response or financial aid. But a lot of those programs do refer to USDM and their maps and have policies for, if an area is in D3 for however long or D2 for however long, we can trigger, response for those areas. So it becomes, it becomes something of, this is how we can, protect and help producers in areas. And so, having that data also gives us better representation of the areas across Tennessee, and it removes that lag drought response when really needed. So here's just, a diagram of what I'm talking about. Combination of these reports, these on the ground reports, with the remote sensing, indices and data that we look at on a daily or weekly basis. combining these two factors into, exactly where we draw our lines, what severity we want to put an area in, and ultimately our recommendations to the USDM. And so Andrew stole my thunder a little bit. here's
I didn't say much about it.
Yeah. Here's the latest last week's drought infographic. This is stuff we put together on a weekly basis and we post on our website, just giving more information and getting more word out about the conditions that we're seeing, showing the current, map, the change map. We've seen, some improvements. So we made improvements and clearly indicating that. We have a what's changed, which is, what areas are changing in their lines from week to week. We have a what's new section of, if this area for last week to this week popped up into D3 or D4, we'd like to put it in the what's new just to, draw people's eyes over into, what's changed from last week. And then we like to do a little bit of a what's next category where we talk about, if we're seeing rain on the horizon or if it's going to look like another dry week. And we also get the information, sorry, I can't say that word, statistics. Yeah. From the USDM. This is the coverage of every, category across the state and the amount of the state that's in D0. This is great because, a couple of weeks ago, we saw this somewhere in the 20 or 30% as it stretched up from Chattanooga to almost Knox County, I believe. So this is like I said, this is the infographic. And if we do it every week. So, if anyone here on this call is interested in, getting on the listserv of us sending this out on a weekly basis, if you're interested, just shoot it in the chat or feel free to email us and we'll be happy to add you to that list. And so I guess now I'll open it up for questions. I put the Tennessee State Climate Office and my email up there and also my phone number if anyone's interested in, talking more about it offline. So, yeah.
I'll go ahead and stop sharing there, but we can share again if anybody has any specific questions about any of the sites that Elijah showed, or if anyone's filled those reports out and you have comments on it, that would be good to hear as well. So I'd kind of like to hear from you guys.
What questions or comments do y'all have? So I have heard from a few extension agents that have tried the CMOR reporting out, and they reported that it was very easy to use and a lot more user friendly than they thought. They just kind of had to get it set up the first time and kind of see how it worked. So I think it's not as complicated as it might appear at first if you just give it a try. How has that been real successful in other states to get that word out? Because we can see that map on the CMOR website and see a lot of states have a lot of reports. Some don't have very many. But how have you seen that successful in getting the word out to the agriculture community to do those reports?
I mean, I think the big thing, and Elijah can add to this, is meetings like this. I think that's what's going on more so in other states, is just kind of communication from their state climate office or it could be a state agency that does the drought monitor input. It varies by state. But we were seeing a lot out of Arkansas earlier this year, and their drought levels weren't as bad as ours, and so obviously there's a good consistent reporting there, or at least they're pushing that there, and they get good information, and I think that they could probably draw their lines a little better. The other part of that, from our perspective, I'd mentioned in the section that I presented on is, building these mesonet stations. Right now we don't have that, so we don't have on the ground soil moisture data. We've got the satellite data that Elijah mentioned, which is a good proxy, but it's not always, like, having that on the ground information is really important. And so in lieu of that, getting information from reports like this is pretty critical, because different soil types or have different drainages and that sort of thing. And so just kind of knowing what's going on the ground is pretty critical. And I think other states that you see more reports, they're having more meetings like this, so there's more awareness. But I don't know what you've seen. Clear.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add to that and say that, from my talks with North and South Carolina, especially, and also Montana and North Dakota, I did see that the biggest, common factor between their successes were that they got the information out when the iron was hot. They did the outreach. They started, putting together infographics and reaching out to folks like you guys and even to citizen observers that were interested when drought was on the front of everyone's minds. I know that that's definitely what South Carolina did, and they saw a lot of success because people were interested in it. In the middle of winter when it's raining and everything's flooding and all of that stuff, people aren't thinking about drought. But following a flash drought like what we had and the impacts that we saw, people are still very much thinking about it. And a lot of it also came from the workshops that they did with the NDMC. Kelly Smith taking people through, doing some training on how to use CMOR, what to look for, what's the best stuff to report, when to report, all of that stuff. That definitely helped build those groups of reporters in those states a lot.
There's a couple of questions in the chat. Can you guys take a look at those?
Sure. Yeah, I see the one from Jerry first. So it says, if you don't see it, if we get the Mesonet system, how will producers get the information on inversions and making spray decisions? And so that would be, there's several states that already do this, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Missouri, North Carolina. All of them pretty much have these pretty simple apps, or it's a part of their Mesonet app where you just go to a spray model and you click a button on your phone. And it has like a couple of things like wind speed, direction, temperature up at the top and a little widget. And then at the bottom, it says good to spray, yes, no. And so it's pretty straightforward. So we would need to create that from the data. But it's pretty much every 5 minutes, you would be able to refresh, it would refresh. So every 5 minutes, there's data coming in from every one of these stations. That will be the reporting rate. So that's something that we would create with that. It would be accessible either through our website or through our app. So you'd be able to get on your phone or on your desktop computer. But let me know, Jerry, if you have other questions about that. Yeah, that would be very useful, definitely. A lot of other states, like I said, have it more than just the 4 I mentioned. I just know about those 4 for sure. And there's a lot of users that really like having that data. And then Jason, you said, what did the prospects look like for the Mesonet to be funded? I really see where this could be very beneficial. Even Tennessee Department of Ag might help fund with the spray inversion reports. So we had there's a funding request right now. That request is being led by TEMA, the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency, to increase their budget to then partner or contract with the Climate Office to build the Mesonet. And so that was presented to the governor at the budget hearings in early November. And so we'll find out in January if that actually makes it into Governor Lee's budget. And if it does, that'll be great. We can we want to keep pushing for it to make sure it goes through. If it doesn't, then the plan B would be to look at separate legislation for that. And there actually was a bill last year that made it all the way to the last day and was approved bipartisan on multiple committees. I actually went and did a testimony for the House Ag and Natural Resources Committee related to the Mesonet last spring. It just got kind of pushed off the table on that last day. And they did want to do a feasibility study. And so we've completed the feasibility study now. And the link that we'll put early on with the story map shows you some of those things that we've done with the suitability, feasibility, possible sites, and the survey for where you'd want to put one. So I think the funding looks promising. We'll know more in a few weeks whenever the governor releases his budget, where we might be going with that. We did get multiple letters of support, and one came from the Department of Ag. So we will be working with Tennessee Department of Ag on this, even if the funding is technically tied through TEMA. We're not going to be just doing emergency management related products and tools. That'll be a big part of it, but I think the ag sector and the environment sectors will all use products from the Mesonet, and we would partner on any sector specific product that needs to be created with any group. So let's see, Andrew, I know you were talking about an annual yearly report. Would you like to see it as a yearly report, more like a monthly or a quarterly report? So what we do is we release, maybe if I'm misunderstanding what you're asking, let me know. But we do, for the last 3 years, we've been doing annual reports, usually in January of the following year. We have those on our website in the monthly report section. And that kind of gives like a big overview. Here's the big things that happen in January, February, March, whatever. And then we have our monthly reports that we usually release by the somewhere second to third week of the subsequent month. So I'm actually should be emailing out probably today or tomorrow the November report. And so those are also on our website, but those are more detailed. So we have all of the storm reports in there of anything that happened. We have story of the month. We have wildfire potential. We have stream flow. We have departures from normal. We have station specific data. There's a lot in there. And so a lot, there's several sections you may not be interested in, but there's lots of information there. And those are cataloged or archived all the way back to September of 2017. If there's ever some past time period that you wanted to look at and get a narrative to see, was it wet, was it dry, hot, cold, that kind of thing. So those are on there. And then we usually build our kind of annual summary based off of those monthly reports.
Andrew might have been asking about the baseline kind of reports with CMOR.
Oh, okay.
Maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
I read it a little differently.
I don't know. You would answer that question with that annual data from CMOR?
Well, so the way that I understand it, if you're asking about the annual CMOR report, are you asking about the year-to-date reports that we were seeing on that map? Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, so there is a section where you can see it as a monthly, just pulling in the monthly data. And so that's what I kind of tend to use if I'm looking at, longer term impacts. When I'm making the, for this week specifically, I tend to look at the last 7 days so that I'm not continuing to use the same pictures and justification, but I do tie it in. Would I like to see it quarterly? I think that could be a cool option. Definitely, so you can look at seasonality, the drought that you saw throughout the summer. We didn't see a lot of stuff throughout the summer. We had a lot of rain, so the reports were at a minimum, like you saw, like on that graph. They didn't start coming in until October. But yeah, I mean, that could be useful for comparison, looking at normal conditions, looking at how bad has this drought been versus the drought that we saw 2 or 3, 4 years ago. And there are options on that map viewer where you can look back at different years and different drought events. There's a lot of cool stuff to play with, and I would anybody who's more interested in it, go on there and look, and it's really cool. It's a really good vehicle for getting that information out there, and it's got a lot of cool parts to it.
So as we look at that CMOR map, there's a whole lot more reports in Tennessee just in the last month or so since we've been working on planning this meeting and getting word out. So that's really exciting. So thanks to everybody that's sharing that information. I guess at this point, we're getting some rain. So is this something we're going to kind of hold in our back pocket a little bit more, or do you foresee that you'd rather have reports, continue to come in, or what's your outlook now versus where we were a month ago when we really needed to see a whole lot more of these local reports?
Yeah, definitely. The ideal situation is, reporting consistently throughout the year, wet or dry, normal or abnormal. But, I know you guys have a lot of, extension agents have a lot on your plates. You're going out and you're looking at counties and you're looking at everything in the county. So, at the bare minimum, if you're going out and you're seeing, drought conditions, if you're seeing drought impacts, just going out and saying, I'm in Washington County and it's severely dry widespread across the county. At the bare minimum, that's useful to us. Anything more than that is just extra. It's, it helps us even more with pinning down, okay, well, in this time of year with this drought occurring right now, we're seeing a lot of impacts to pasture and rangeland. And then the impacts from that to cattle, but, having a drought, I'm not a producer, but having a drought sometime in the summer during the growing season, that leads us to go, okay, well, now the corn's being impacted. Now the row crops are being impacted. So having that additional information is great. But just, at the bare minimum, putting in information during a drought, what severity of drought you're seeing across with your windshield observations is awesome. But if you guys want to carry the torch and report even during normal or even wet conditions, like that's going to help us too. So
yeah, and I'll add, Elijah mentioned corn. You guys know more in your county, when certain crops are supposed to be producing or at certain stages. I know corn in particular has a critical couple of weeks there in June or July, depending on where you're at. And we've seen there's been I think it was Alabama that did some research on this, their state climate office, where they had pretty much a flash drought over that couple of week period that was really critical for corn. And that was it. That, it was dry those few weeks. It major impact on the corn, but they struggled to get crop disaster loss assistance because it was very quick and they weren't getting those on the ground reports quick enough. And so, that's things that we look out for in those kind of warmer situations where a drought could really creep up on us really quick. And we've seen, I would say, more of those types of short duration, strong intensity droughts more recently, with longer periods in between of no drought or less drought. So I don't know if that will continue or not, but during those very critical moments, especially in the ag sector, when that would be when we want to hear from you the most on those on the ground reports. So it's middle of the winter, not much growing out there, and we're getting a little wetter. So we would suspect there to not be too many reports coming in unless something changes over the next couple of months.
Any other questions out there? I've got one more final question to chime in with, but I'd rather hear from you all if you have any other questions.
See,
you want to mention that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's from Will.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I could talk if you like. I just put a chat in the note in the chat saying that with the drought monitor, it's based off of Tuesday morning to Tuesday morning each week. So if you're adding in reports on a Wednesday or a Thursday and you're like, hey, the drought monitor map came out Thursday and you don't see any changes, that would be reflected in the following week's map.
And that does make, like in the summer when we have these rapid onset drought events, that makes it a little tricky since it's a week-long time period between drought monitor updates, and it's Tuesday to Tuesday where the data is from, but then the drought monitor is not released until Thursday. And so, when that drought monitor comes out, it's really looking at data that's half of it's over a week old. But that's just the process for it. And so staying on top of that and getting the most information to provide to the author that week, the drought monitor author that week, is pretty critical.
Yeah, that's good information for everybody. So just to make sure, any conditions are very valuable. And so if there's a pond that dries up, even if not a crop related thing, but a pond, that's very significant. A photo could tell a good story if it's never dried up before, or if it's only been dry once in the last 20 years. Those are the kind of things that you guys would like to hear, it sounds like. So I just was going to say, if you have any photo tips besides that, that was one of the things that some extension agents said, well, I'm not sure I have a great photo, but just a photo of on the ground is useful for you guys, it sounds like, of whatever you've got. And I think just from my perspective, as we start to wrap up, I think we're looking forward to more opportunities for some collaboration between our organizations, and just glad to get to know what you all do. And I think I've found it very handy to see those reports that come out of your office, just to keep up with what's happening and how things are progressing across the state as far as weather goes. So thank you for what you do.
No, we appreciate that. Yeah, we have a lot of fun. So yeah, let us know if you have other questions. I know we're up on time now. But certainly shoot us an email to the State Climate Office email, the tnclimate@etsu.edu, or you're welcome to reach out to us individually, me, Elijah, or Will. Happy to answer any questions or talk with you guys again.
Ty, I got a question.
Sure, Jason.
Is when you're doing the drought reporting, do you guys figure in evaporation rate with that as far as when rainfall would occur? I know where we were at in northern Middle Tennessee, a lot of my guys we were getting small amounts of rainfall, but the problem was they were saying, hey, it's not doing anything because the wind was blowing 30 mile an hour. And before, the ground was wet for a couple of hours, and as soon as the sun shined and the wind was blowing 30 miles an hour, it was gone.
Yeah.
And that's what I've got to explain to them. That's why our drought line didn't move up, was because of that, but it wasn't benefiting at all. But it was just kind of staying put because of the quarter inch or half inch of rain that we might have got.
Yeah.
So
no, that's a good point. I would say that's an area where we could use some improvement, and where additional data from like the mesonet stations would help us with that type of calculation. Yeah, because we really don't have that. We have proxies for that, it's soil moisture from satellite. And that's, that gives us a good sign of, did it actually help? Because if it's not improving, or you see a quarter inch of rain, but you've got soil moisture deterioration week to week, then it didn't really, it evaporated. And so we can do that with that data, but I would say there's a bit of a gap there in knowledge with evaporation.
Because I noticed the lag. I went back and looked at the reports on data, and we didn't enter we were only moderately dry until like the 1st of October. And I had producers, once we got really dry and they started seeing some of the drought reports in Southern Tennessee, they're like, I've been feeding hay since the 1st of October. Well, we didn't hit drought. We didn't hit the D1 designation until like the second week in October, and they were already feeding hay.
Yeah.
So we were already much drier than, we were given credit for. So I think fixing the lag, I think the mesonet is going to be really big if we can get it funded.
Yeah, no, for sure. Having that live data, real-time data, and so much. I mean, like I said, it's coming in every 5 minutes. So, for soil moisture, maybe you don't need that high a temporal resolution, but still, you've got access to what it is right now, all across. There'd be at least one in every county, so that's the whole state. And so that would be pretty critical, we think, to improving how we report that.
And the CMOR data really could help you to identify those spots too, wouldn't it, as well? And you could make some adjustments to that.
Absolutely. And we have, we saw someone, I think, submitted a dry pond. That was one of the pictures we looked at. That helped inform, an area where we're like, oh, we don't know if it needs to go from D1 to D2. Okay, we see that picture. We see that. Okay, that's good for us. We will move that. We'll at least recommend. And we don't draw the line, we recommend it.
Right.
And so the author ultimately makes the decision. They may not agree with exactly where we draw the line. And so that's just part of the process. It's a collaborative process at the local, state, regional, and national level, because there's one author each week for the whole country. And so that's, and he gets, I assume, hundreds of emails, going back and forth from everybody's states and counties with information. And so, but there's an area, they submit multiple drafts. And so if there's an area, and we've seen this in the past, south of Knoxville near the airport a couple years ago, very dry area, but really small. And they would not, for like a couple weeks, listen to our recommendations that this needs to be in D2. And so we had data from the airport. We contacted, I believe that was the Blount County extension agent there.
John Wilson.
Yeah, we contacted him. We're like, hey, is it's not just satellite, right? It's really dry there. And he said, yeah, here's the impacts, here's that information. And so then we were, even though the drought author was not wanting to do that based on the data they were seeing, we're like, look, now we have on the ground information with the extension agent. We really need this to be in D2. And they did it that week. You know, it was probably a week or two later than they should have done it, but it was very small and they're not there, you know. And so the more information like that we have, we can really push hard for certain changes if we feel really strong about it and we have the data to back it up.
That's great to hear. And we appreciate how you all support agriculture across the state. I think we all have the same mission at heart here to support our agriculture community. So thank you all for a great session today. I'm going to hit the stop record. If anybody wants to hang around and chat for just a minute, you're welcome to if you have any other questions. But I really appreciate everybody joining us today. Have a good evening.